Okay, next we're going to talk about the audio mod section. And look at it. It's just 4 knobs. It's just 4 little things going on. It almost seems like you could just ignore it. It's just these 4 knobs. But what we're looking at here is a huge, staggeringly ridiculous source of timbre generation and modulation that blows my mind. I can barely look at it. Okay. The audio mod section, let's remember that the LFOs are low frequency oscillators. That means that they are usually, the general concept of an LFO is that its modulation is slower than 20 vibrations per second, 20 movements back and forth. It's low frequency because it's sub audio. And that way we can hear the individual shape of the LFO as it happens, as you will see in the LFO videos. But so we can hear, the wave going up and down. It's slow enough that we can. High frequency oscillators or oscillators are oscillators that vibrate within our hearing range, which is 20 times per second and up. So they're moving very fast. They're in the audio range. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about audio mod. It is an oscillation that is in the audio range, but it's still being applied just like you would apply an LFO. It's still a modulation back and forth. In this case, it is in many ways a modulation, an audio range modulation of audio range oscillators. Okay, so for example, this first knob is VCO1 modulating VCO2's frequency with its own frequency. So the movement back and forth that is VCO1 is applied to the frequency of the movement back and forth that is VCO2. Let's have a listen. You're going to recognize this sound. I'm going to turn off VCO1 so we're not listening to it and we are just listening to VCO2. Okay, here we go. Yes, that is frequency modulation. That's FM. It's audio range frequency modulation. So you might say to yourself, and it would be reasonable for you to say this, okay, cool. So when I turn that knob, it makes this cool effect. Yeah. Except for, that's not even close to everything that's going on here. Here we go. Because oscillator 1 is modulating oscillator 2, we are hearing the wave shape of oscillator 1 affecting the frequency of oscillator 2. So right now we're just hearing a saw. Listen to what happens when we turn the saw down. Nothing. Well, let me make these knobs more apparent of what we're dealing with. So I've turned the saw down. All of a sudden, oscillator 2 is unmodulated. That's because we have turned the volume of the single modulator, which in this case was the sawtooth wave, all the way down. So we can turn it up. So you can not only turn this, adjust this, cause this to happen using this knob here. This is an amount control, but you also can control the amount, fine tune the amount with the individual levels of the waveforms themselves. So you can see this is a hugely powerful tool. Let's hear square wave. And because these are different wave shapes, that means the modulation is a different wave shape and it's going to have a different sound. Not to mention when we start to mix them. Now, if you're trying to emulate a violin, actually you can use this to help you better emulate a violin. But right now I can hear you saying, wow, those are some pretty bizarre sounds. And yes, they are. And they're a lot of fun. And keep in mind, again, we're still not done. Whatever you can do to VCO1, you can modulate VCO2 with using this function. So, like, that means let's turn up ultrasaw, hear how that sounds. Because of the fluctuation in the ultrasaw effect that affects the timbre of oscillator 1. Once you affect the timbre, you're affecting the wave shape, and the wave shape is modulating oscillator 2's frequency. So you're going to get weirdnesses. And since this one changes over time, you're hearing it change over time. These other ones, you can turn up pulse width. Let's have a listen to that. You can get all kinds of different effects. Let's keep all of these sounds I've just been making, all coming from a single knob, people. One little knob turn is doing this. Well, I mean, we're turning these knobs too. But basically, this one effect has all of these possibilities. And let's listen to Metalizer. There's just a lowly triangle. In that case, right there, you've just got a really nice timbre. So it just gets weirder and weirder. We can hear all of it at once. And let's not forget that also the sub-oscillator works in this. And any change that you make to the frequency of VCO1 is going to make a difference. Hey, say while we're in the sub-oscillator, let's turn the sub-oscillator all the way up. Sub-oscillator is a lower frequency than the rest of the oscillator, right? So let's turn down the coarse and see if we can get it to a point where it sounds like a low frequency oscillator. The vibration is moving back and forth slowly enough that we can actually hear the wave shape of it. And we can listen to that. You're hearing a sine wave modulating the frequency of VCO2. That's awesome. And there's that square wave, which sounds different. So you have all of those possibilities, and that's ridiculous. But let's also remember that anything that you can do to VCO1 is going to modulate VCO2. So, for example, let's go over here to the patch panel. If we decide to use envelope 1 to modulate VCO1's pitch, you're going to get total insanity. And let's also remember, you may say, Mark, that's all very well and good, but I can't just have that on all the time. What if I just want that as an effect? Well, all you have to do is go over here to your assignable part of the matrix, hold down a button, turn this VCO1 to VCO2 knob. Now you can modulate that. So let's turn it all the way off. We just have oscillator 2 doing its thing. And if you want mayhem, let's just use the mod wheel because it's easy. I've connected the mod wheel to this knob. Since we've put this knob over here in the assignable section, I'm going to turn up the modulation ability. And now you can create the madness. Let's turn it all the way up. So, this video is supposed to be about the entire audio mod section, but I had to show you just the degree to which you can modulate the things that are happening in the audio mod functionality with the oscillator, the modulation source itself, or using the patch panel. So that's the kind of madness you can do with every single one of these knobs. And it's crazy. It just depends on what's modulating what. So if you change the modulator or what's being modulated, you're going to get crazy, outrageous effects like this. Okay, I'm going to switch this back for a second. Get us back to 0. Okay, and go back to mod in case we end up using that. Okay, next, let's go over here to VCO3 as a modulation source. Whatever VCO3 is set to will modulate VCO1 or VCO2. So if we don't listen to VCO3 or VCO2, this is VCO3 modulating VCO1. So if we change the functions on VCO3, you're going to get different sounds. But yeah, so that creates whatever, if you manipulate VCO3, you're going to change what's happening with VCO1, and the same with VCO1. So you change the modulator or change the destination, you're going to get a different outcome. We can do the same thing to VCO2 using VCO3. So you can direct VCO3 to either VCO1 or VCO2 as a modulation, and whatever you do to VCO3, you can get a different outcome. Now remember, the VCO3 only has one knob, so if you're going to go over here into the assignable section, your course is about the only thing you're going to be able to change with that, and maybe that's fine. Okay, next we have VCO3, an audio range oscillator. Incidentally, I'm told that it's hertz per volt, which is interesting. Anyway, it's modulating your filter. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Go back to oscillator 1. Let's get a good saw wave going. This is VCO3 modulating the frequency cutoff of the filter. It's a pretty subtle effect, but it just adds some sort of distortion to it. And depending on what you're doing with actually that filter, in addition to this modulation, you can get probably some pretty bizarre effects. And likewise, we can do this to filter 2. So if you have it like the resonance all the way up so it's self-oscillating, bring in the brute factor, crazy madness, filter envelope. So if you want to do this very slightly, you can get some nice subtle distortion. To add to that fatness, being able to modulate a filter with an oscillator in the audio range creates wonderful fatness. Okay, so there's that. Lastly, if you thought you're going to get out of the synthesizer without being able to modulate an oscillator with noise, you're out of luck, because we can use noise to modulate VCO1. So again, any of the changes that you make to VCO1 are going to have an effect on the timbre. And the changes you make to noise are going to affect. That's what white noise sounds like. Here's what pink noise sounds like. Red noise. Blue noise. So you can create some really interesting sounds, and you can add it subtly. It does affect the pitch, but you can adjust the pitch to be appropriate again. And of course, you can use noise to modulate the filter. VCF1 anyway. Let's get it to VCF1. You can give it just sort of that subtle little buzzy sound, or change the noise again. Make it a little more subtle. If you want to do some spit in your trumpet sound or something, Some red noise. Let's create some variation in the sound. Or total sizzling madness, if that's what you want. Some blue noise. Anyway, so yes, as you can tell, this section is way more powerful than I'm even giving it credit, because we could do the things we did with the first knob with all of these knobs by modulating not only the source in the many ways that the source can be modulated, the modulation source, but also the modulation destination can be modulated and controlled in a variety of fashions that will generate just the most incredible universe of sounds. And it's a struggle for me because I want to demonstrate it, but there's just so much that can be done. I have to give you just the basic ideas. Okay, so that is scraping the very top, tiniest layer of what the audio mod can do, but it gives you an idea of what the function is for and capable of.